Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on your geography, or I guess good evening if you're catching us from other parts of the world. First, I want to start off by just letting Josh know and the whole chat feed know what I had for lunch today. I had a great slice of piece of grilled chicken, a little bit of sweet peppers there on the side, and then some pretzel chips with some guacamole. So definitely a fulfilling and nutritious lunch that got us ready to talk about artificial intelligence. So as we talk about artificial intelligence, I think it's important to recognize, and obviously Brandon talked a lot about the impact of technology in the world of L&D. AI or artificial intelligence are things that are on the top of people's mind. People want to know, what are you doing with it? What can you do with it? What is it all about? But I think it's important to anchor ourselves first in the definition of what artificial intelligence is. Okay? So what is artificial intelligence? Now, I will echo, I have a new member of our team, Gil Walchuk, who said, well, you reference things like Allen Iverson during your presentation today. And for those of us who know Allen Iverson, this is not the AI I'm talking about, or Andre Iguodala, who also would be another AI who I'm not going to reference or talk about. But for Gil, I'm going to drop both those in inside this session. But artificial intelligence, as you can read, is defined as the theory of development of computer systems that are able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision making, and translation between languages. A lot of words. Let's break it down to something simple, which I always like to do. Think about artificial intelligence for those who are parents who really get this phase, to when your kids enter the why phase, right? They're constantly wanting to learn why. As a matter of fact, you always see like a broken record, like are they retaining it? What are they doing? Artificial intelligence is the ability to allow these systems who are going to continue to always ask why. They want to learn more. They are going to be able to do things that as human beings we do because we're programming them to do it. We'll get back to that. Now, emphasizing that we're programming them to do. Artificial intelligence doesn't exist without human interaction, right? So human beings are a major part of the artificial intelligence process in creating it, in defining it, and supporting it and interacting with it, right? So this is not a standalone solution to solve all the world's problems. I always like to anchor this back to how many different buzzwords have I been a part of in my 30-year journey, right? I think the first one that I always found funny and humorful was when the era of collaboration took off. I can't remember if this was in the early 90s anymore. I'm getting old. I'm starting to forget stuff. But people talked about collaboration and portals. We're going to change the world. People are going to be able to share content, be able to post documents, interact globally. And yeah, it had an impact. But did collaboration change our world? Did things like SharePoint or Jive or any of these portal products make the world a better place? I'm not sure we can argue that they did or didn't. The next thing was the social enterprise. It was the phenomenon of the ability to communicate and not only collaborate. So now I was going to create a feed next to my collaboration, and I was going to change the world through social enterprise. And when I was in the consulting space, my running joke with people would be is, I guarantee you when we are done deploying your social enterprise solution inside your portal, the same 10% of people who posted documents were the same 10% of people in the social feed. And yeah, it got a little better as we've gotten generationally different. But my theme here, right, is in technology alone or buzzwords don't solve problems. The combination of people and technology together have the opportunity to solve problems. And as we go through what is artificial intelligence, how to use it, how to plan for it, remember that. And also, and I'll say this throughout, never be afraid to say no or wait. Because it's important to know that AI, and you'll see this, is also dangerous. Because imagine that same toddler, that same child who kept coming up to you and asking why, all of a sudden had the ability to impact and make decisions from that to cause actions, right? I don't think anybody who's listening to this, who has a child, who's gone through the why phase, would then want their kid taking action right after learning why. Well, AI, this machine is kind of like a baby, but with the ability to take action with it along the way. So let's go ahead and get started and keep the ball rolling here. So let's talk about the challenges in just deploying artificial intelligence, or as we're going to call it, AI moving forward, right? The first thing that you must have for AI is you must understand that to deploy effective AI, your data, which is what the artificial intelligence is based on, the structure, the format, the updating, the way it gathers it, must be fully thought out. There can be major difficulties if you haven't thought through the implications of how to store the data, how to use the data, and effectively, essentially deploy the data into action. The second one is all about technology, okay? The fact that you're deploying something that's automated means there's opportunity for trouble. Now, I like to go back to simple stuff. If you're old enough and you remember when the first flat screen televisions came out, right? And they came out, everyone was super excited about the ability to have flat panel, ability to have plasma, ability to have things. And I still remember to this day, we bought a TV, we bought one that was maybe not the best brand on the market. We brought it home, and about a year and a half later, the picture tube snapped or whatever was in there that they called the plasma. I'm not a tech TV guy. And my wife looked at me and said, see, none of this works. Well, you know, the truth of the matter is that she's right, is technology always has troubles. No one here at home can say their internet has never gone down. No one here at home can say something hasn't broken a piece of equipment. You're going to have technology troubles. And if you deploy AI inside your solution and you're dependent upon it without a strategy about how to maintain your technology, how to overcome the technology challenges, you are going to have technology trouble, right? So it's important to know that all AI is not created equal, and not everybody should be in the business of implementing and deploying AI. Next thing let's talk about is security, right? Security is super important in all of our worlds, right? For all of us, and I know because I know who's on the phone or part of the call, we're all in very large companies. There are lots of rules and regulations around how we interact with content, both in and off the corporate network, all types of policies by our chief risk officer, our chief security officer, our chief information officer, our chief technology officer, our chiefs of chiefs officers, right? Everyone's got a policy related to security. Again, it's an important part of the planning process, because if somebody doesn't have the right authority, the right access, the right information, what your intended consequence for that implementation will lead to challenges, right? And again, I'm pointing these out because I think it's important that we all process. AI is just not the end all be all of all things you're going to see. Again, I want to point out these challenges. The next one, and I think it's a great, I always love when, this new feature in PowerPoint, which is deal probably with a lot of artificial intelligence, allows you to then help you design great PowerPoint text. And when originally it came up with models misbehaving, it came up with my cat, I kind of found a chuckle because there's a great parallel with that, right? Cats have a habit of not intentionally misbehaving, but wandering their way into things that they're curious. They're curious cats, right? And so AI kind of is like a curious cat. It's going to wander its way around. Models are going to expand and you're going to hear lots of examples, not one I'm going to bring up right now, but you can go Google this yourself, because Google's had some challenges with AI, right? They built artificial intelligence with the intent of learning 2 languages, Spanish and Italian. When the model was done, it said, well, I want to keep learning, and went to search and learn other languages. Now, is that a bad thing? I don't know. But again, it was AI, go ahead, as its model moving outside of it, because there were no limits in place to the model. It didn't say, hey, when you're done artificial intelligence learning Spanish, learning Italian, please stop and don't go any further. It's kind of like, for the cat's sake, it'd be like, hey, we want you to go in your cat litter, so we're going to occasionally you a nice little path, but then blocking the door and not allowing the cat to go through, right? We have to make sure that the cat can get where it wants to go, or the model. And then finally, interaction issues, right? So this is hard to plan for. This is why when you deploy AI, you need to make sure you're tracking, measuring, and looking and using tools like you saw Matthew Daniel talk about yesterday, which is making sure you're mapping the interaction that's going on the platform, making sure that the AI you've designed, the solution you've designed, is reaching its overall goals by constantly paying attention to it, right? Now, that's another word. Constantly paying attention to your artificial intelligence to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do, right? And in order to do that, if you plan it right, you have to have the controls in place to be able to take action. So these are some of the challenges you're facing. Not all the challenges, but I thought these were the ones that were bubbling up as most important. So let's move on to the risk, right? The risks. We'll get to the benefits, but what's the risk? Let me grab a sip of coffee here, post my lunch. They are, as I mentioned, autonomous weapons. And what does that mean? That sounds awfully scary. You use the word weapons and you use autonomous. But artificial intelligence is designed to operate on its own without interactions from human beings to control it. Essentially, if you don't plan like we've just talked about with it, taking care of all the planning phase of the challenges, you have the opportunity that you've created an autonomous weapon. You've created something that's going to reach an outcome that you hadn't planned for, that you can't control, and then you have to figure out how to scale back and react to. The second risk is social manipulation. Now, you'll actually see a couple of these different use cases where we talk about the interaction. One of the most famous ones related to Microsoft, which we'll get into. But there's an opportunity for, as the artificial intelligence learns, to it become manipulated, and if it's in a social or collaborative environment, to continue to bring out other social biases, right? We talk about this concept of bias all the time in the learning space, right? I often talk to a lot of clients about the concept that you can't design content the same way for all audiences. right? Not everybody grew up learning the same way. Not everybody's brain functions the same way. Not everybody has the same interest level or passion around learning or improving self-performance. So you have to think about, how do I design content to interact that way? The same thing here exists in social manipulation. You have to always understand that as users interact with content, as that AI interacts with different sources, it has that opportunity to manipulate social outcomes by leading to things in bias, right? Leading into ways. And we'll talk about this, like an example, when you deploy your learning path, or you want to use AI to maybe drive predictive outcomes in the learning path, you have to essentially account for things that are in the social bias of people and say, is all content created equal? How do I map the learning paths? Am I going to create bias and send someone a piece of content that may essentially, unbeknownst to me, create a social bias or an outcome I hadn't accounted for? You've got a big one here. We're basically, artificial intelligence is one of the most evasive forms of invading people's privacy you can get, right? Because it doesn't account for people. All it thinks about is, where is it going on its journey to learn, right? So again, if you're using this inside of a company and the artificial intelligence is crawling learner performance, is that something you need to check with HR on, right? If you're going to have your AI essentially go into performance-based systems, like let's take a real world example. Let's say I built artificial intelligence and I'm working in a contact center, and I want to deploy AI to go into our workforce management tool and yank out, based upon people's way they interact with the system, maybe the way they interact with my knowledge management tool. I want to basically grab all that data, and then I want to recommend learning to improve their performance. Well, I've done that in a very passive way, except I've done it by invading the privacy of the people who are interacting in the system. So again, I think it's just important to realize that you have steps you have to take to ensure whatever you have built is aware of privacy concerns, aware of those issues, because you want to make sure that there's a connection there. There's also this tremendous opportunity for misalignment between your goals and the machine's goals, right? So I think Google's example is great, right? Because it tells you, hey, I want you to go learn Spanish and Italian, and lo and behold, it's now learning Portuguese. Again, not a super intended consequence. But I can't remember the company name, but a very well-known company in the aerospace industry decided they were going to build AI to essentially enable planes to learn how to handle adverse weather situations. And as machines do, they start to learn. They're going through the simulator. It's watching the simulator. It's landing in thunderstorms. It's landing in rain. And somewhere along the journey, landing in snow, wind, etc., lightning. And somewhere along the journey, the machine figures out that it's actually better to crash the plane than it is to try and land it in these weather conditions. I can guarantee you that the person that designed the artificial intelligence did not plan on the virtual simulator teaching the plane or the artificial intelligence to crash the plane with the people on it. Nobody wants to do that, right? Again, it's just important to think that if you don't have controls in place around artificial intelligence, it will learn regardless of whether you want to or not, okay? And then finally, discrimination, right? We got to understand that within AI, it's an opportunity actually to help accessibility, but discrimination isn't just about accessibility and getting access to content. It's discrimination related to things around elements of ethnicity, elements of race. It has all types of potential baggage that comes with that, okay? Oh, and by the way, if there are questions along the way, I talk really fast and having a cup of coffee, so please stop and interact and make sure that Josh has you on the channel. He'll stop me along the way, and we can gladly answer questions, or I'll do that at the end. So now that I've understand, my risks, I've talked about, what I need to be aware of. How do I do this in a way that is controllable? And I want to put an emphasis on controllable. We're going to talk about the phases and how to deal with things like the concept phase all the way to maintenance. But I also want to make sure that everyone's aware, when you are looking at AI, and when you're looking at deploying it, especially when you talk about custom, building it once is not the challenge. Building it once is actually the easy part. Making sure you have the resources dedicated to maintain, and if not the technical resources, then the tools necessary to allow the non-technical user to be able to maintain the AI and control the AI. And by the way, that's a reasonable request on your vendors. So if you're using tools that say they use artificial intelligence, before you purchase them, and if you've already purchased them, ask them to understand how they control it, how they ensure that it reaches its intended consequences. I joke with our customers, and many of you heard the phone, One of the reasons we haven't deployed massive artificial intelligence yet is I challenge Whitney all the time to build controllable AI. And what I mean by controllable is how do you, as my audience, which are non-technical folks, be able to control whatever we build so that you know you're ensured that you have control over your artificial intelligence. So enough of my soapbox moment. We'll go back into how do I get from beginning to end. So just like any project, you got to start the concept phase. And what I would suggest here is you build the concept, you talk it, and you fully pull out the purpose, how you're going to do the analytic method, the anticipated variables and the intended outcomes, and then you send it off to a third party. What I mean by third party is someone who's not attached to the project, someone who's not personally invested in this thing coming to life. So if that's a peer, if that's a business owner, if that's maybe it is an actual third party, you just want to have validation that what you've built is not going to, at concept phase, lead to unintended consequences you haven't thought about. I think about this, and I go back to Matthew Daniels' comments yesterday when he says talking about designing for your mind's eye versus the customer's mind's eye. This is a very similar point here at the concept phase. It's important to actually get third-party validation from any source that you have done that. The next, and I'll tell you this is pretty important, is on the data management. How are you going to manage the data, and what is the regular review process? You notice there's a lot of review going on here, right? Why is there review? And this is because of AI. It lives and evolves. It's not like other applications where you have to do it. I will say if you have the same strategy that you put in place for maintaining the content in your corporate portal or your learning portal, you are in trouble, right? Because I can tell you right now that if I took a random survey and I went to search someone's company intranet or company's learning management system, there is content that is out of date in that system. Companies struggle to maintain these systems because they don't have a regular process in place and they don't have the discipline to remove content when it becomes out of date. Now, there are a few that do it well. Here, it's a mandatory. If you can't do it, you shouldn't be building your own AI. Buy it off the shelf, let someone else deal with it. You've got to be able to ensure you have a regular review process. Once you've got that defined, you're in concept phase. You've moved down to the data management phase. Now it's about how do I develop the model, right? And this is where you get into the technical, the zeros and the ones. How do I ensure that all my data sources are comprehensive and my algorithms are built with limits? Notice the word limits there, right? It's really important when you're talking about artificial intelligence, and I've said this and I'm repeating it so that it kind of comes in, it has to have limits. If the intent is to learn 2 languages, when it's done learning 2 languages, the artificial intelligence is complete. Again, if there's a review process, you can expand that as you're going on through the process. If the AI was built simply to recommend to learners the course that they should take based on their performance, make sure it stops at that level. Make sure there are limits and the algorithms have those limits, and ensure that your technical partner is validating that by proving it to you and that you're regularly checking on that. Okay, so now you've got your model, you've got your concept phase complete, your data management strategy, and now we're going to go deploy the model, right? So what does that mean? Again, you're going to see this concept around make sure the tech resources are available to allow AI to scale. That simply means do not deploy if you don't have the right team behind you to be successful, ensuring that your AI will have the opportunity to scale. It also means that you have the right amount of infrastructure to deploy AI. Let's say you're a global company. You work with people here in the US, you have people in Europe, you have people in the Asia region, maybe you have someone in Australia, you got some in South America, you got everybody all over the globe, and we've covered, I think, a good part of it right there. How do I ensure that everyone has access to the system and that I have the right resources to scale, right? What if my AI is such a success that it starts banging away at my corporate servers and people are waiting a long time to get results? No matter how good my artificial intelligence is, if it doesn't work and people are waiting a long time, I'm going to fail. You got to remember that people's brains are used to on-demand delivery, right? We live in a world where my cell phone's over there, so I can't hold it up, where our cell phones have spoiled us. We have apps that allow us to do basically everything with a click of a button. For example, I'm sitting here in Atlanta. The Atlanta United plays in the championship game tonight. I'm debating whether to go, and I'm watching on StubHub and Ticketmasters how prices drop. And I guarantee if I make a decision, if the game's at 8, it'll be at 7 p.m. Catch me 20 years ago. If I didn't have tickets already, I'd be home. Well, catch me 20 years ago in the MLS. We're still struggling to have a product, but that's not either nor here nor there. It's also the same way with an airline ticket, right? Go ahead and buy an airline ticket. Go ahead and rent a hotel room. Go ahead and need directions. Whatever you need, it happens immediately. So in your mind, if your tech resources aren't there to allow them to ensure that they get it on demand and get it quickly, you're going to struggle, and you need that to scale your AI. And then finally, again, can't strangle this enough. If you don't have a maintenance strategy, if you don't have regular checks and updates to both the data model and the algorithms, you are asking for trouble. You are asking to be one of those things that are going to be searched on Google to talk about AI failures, and nobody wants that. So if I haven't scared you enough about AI, I hope I did. It's not scare in a bad way. It's scare to just make sure you're prepared, because my goal with this is just to ensure you're aware of what all the challenges are that are there. So now that I've scared you, let's talk about the potential. What can AI unlock in L&D, right? That's probably like everybody on the chat. He's like, thank God he got to the punchline. Not really a fun punchline, but it's definitely a punchline. So what does AI allow us to do? First thing first, this is the easiest one, is personalize the learning experience, right? If I use artificial intelligence to comb the learning experiences that my associates go through, I can tailor personalized learning to them based on the outcome of how they've interacted with content. This could be really simple. This could be, I saw an individual who I'm tracking artificial intelligence essentially just tracks what a person learns or takes in as content to consume. And then from taking that content to consume, I can make assumptions in my artificial intelligence design that say, based on Josh going ahead and grabbing a learning file about how to use a cell phone, the follow-up could be that I want to now send Josh a series of other how to use learning pieces of content. Maybe one on how to use his PC, how to use Microsoft Outlook, how to use Teams, how to use. I could use that as a logic to personalize the learning experience. And Josh, more than likely, is going to be pretty excited about getting recommendations related to that. It could also be from deeper into how they scored on the learning experience. It could be, like I talked about before, taking data from systems that exist inside of the company and bringing them into the learning world and delivering learning based on actual real-world performance. You'll hear a lot about delivering learning in the flow of work from Conrad, I believe, when I am done in a bit. And he'll talk about maybe not the use of artificial intelligence, but how to deliver learning in the flow of work, and AI is a way to do that, okay? You can enhance your employee training, right? You can use artificial intelligence to make your training more interactive, more dynamic, right? You could build learning itself that reacts to each individual actions and then designs an experience based upon those actions, right? You can use artificial intelligence combined with virtual reality to create some amazing things for learners to go through. Again, whenever you build it, make sure you've thought through, again, how do I maintain that and control the experience? Also a great way to make sure you have it available for all learners, right? So artificial intelligence has the ability to say, hey, I recognize that this person is logged in and they are suffering from sight challenges or hearing challenges. And maybe that allows me to know when they've logged in to do that. I can dynamically send them content that meets and fits their needs versus being able to essentially, just deliver content as if I didn't know who they were. Again, there's some smart ways, a very lightweight way, they use artificial intelligence in that accessibility space to get a lot of value for that learner. AI can turn into digital tutors, right? What about artificial intelligence used as bots, right? We're seeing a lot of bots being created in the customer service space. These bots could also be in the learning space, right? And they could essentially come in and you could finish a program. We'll pick on poor Josh again because he's sitting in front of me. And Josh struggled with his cell phone and using a cell phone. Maybe he struggled on how to download the email app. And because of the simulation experience we've created in the learning, we can see that. And now what we do is Jimmy, the digital tutor, shows up on the side. Maybe like if we're all remember Clippy, the icon for Microsoft, maybe he shows up like Clippy. Hey, Josh, how you doing? I want to help you learn a few great things today. Ask me some other questions about how to set up Outlook on your phone. And Josh can interact with that content in a bot format, essentially as a digital tutor, extending out the network of the value that the company's created to the individual. You could have AI, I think Brandon talked about this, create content, right? It could basically, based on what the learners are going through or based on the content you have, start to be taught how to dynamically build content for you, dynamically build learning content, right? Unbelievable stuff that you can do with AI. If you program it the right way, you teach it what to do, it has that opportunity to kind of help you down that path. And then finally, has the potential to eliminate bias, designed correctly, right? Which means your design team has to have a large flavor of blend to it, right? If a single-threaded person designs the experience, then I can promise you the natural biases of that individual, whether they mean it or not, are going to come through in the design of the AI. But if it's a diverse team of individuals that create artificial intelligence, you have the opportunity to programmatically eliminate the bias in the program itself, and therefore eliminating the bias as the person interacts with L&D. These are just, I call these 6 potential opportunities. If I was in the shoes of a client of ours, I'd focus on the personalized learning experience first. I might drop into the accessibility for our learners. I'd be very scared of content creation. And I certainly would jump in to understand what bots are all about, right? Because I think bots are an opportunity both internally and externally to help create a better customer experience. And as Brandon told you, L&D needs to be a part of that, but also a better employee experience for your associates. So these are the areas where I would spend my money and time. Again, and I think you'll see from us how as MLevel, we try to work on that personalized learning experience and help you give you controls and by when using MLevel to deploy it effectively. So we've covered some examples, we've covered some risks. And so now let's get to the fun part. I know it's only fun for me, but I spent some time when building this deck doing research. And as part of that research, I asked the Google to do a search for me. And I said, Google, please tell me about some great stories when AI goes wrong. And then I went to go find and see what companies have deployed AI. And what I was dumbfounded by is some of these brands that you're seeing on your screen are some of the largest technology companies in the world, right? So let's start with Uber. Uber's not per se what defined as a technology company in most, but I would argue that's what it is because it's an app that has redefined the way we get around, both from a standpoint of rideshare as well as how people and the economy can make additional money. So Uber, has a way that they can save money as a business, right? They can essentially use artificial intelligence to do self-driving, right? Which is really what autonomous driving is. It's using AI to essentially drive and learn as it goes through the process. And when Uber rolled out its first self-driving car, they killed a pedestrian. Everybody remember that, right? It rolled out, they killed a pedestrian. I consider that artificial intelligence gone wrong. Death was probably not the intended consequence when the Uber team decided to roll out the self-driving car. But again, it points out, without a plan, without a thought process, without a way to control it, your unintended consequences. I bet you if Uber had their mindset now, they might have put someone in the car, even if they didn't drive, just in case the car took over and had a mind of its own, literally. The next one down is about IBM, right? So IBM, right, they built this product called Watson. Watson is one of the smartest. It's great. It learns. It does all these things. So a group down in Florida said, we are going to purchase Watson. We're going to use it for oncology. And spent about $62 million to find out that Watson was making unsafe treatment recommendations for patients. I can promise you that when the hospital bought the system from Watson and IBM stood there and the sales team got together and they said, hey, we're going to help you solve the oncology challenge. We're going to help recommend treatments for patients based upon all the access to data we have around oncology, around cancer around the world, right? That's what Watson can do because it processes more than your doctors can because it has the world's knowledge base. I can guarantee you the intended consequence was not unsafe treatment recommendations for patients. Promise you there. I talked earlier about Microsoft. So I don't remember, Microsoft released an AI chatbot that got corrupted by Twitter trolls and all of a sudden started having all types of social issues. We had people hijacking the AI chatbot to take on racist commentary. We had all types of what I would call socially inappropriate things that happened. And Microsoft quickly apologized and pulled down the chatbot. Shortly thereafter, Microsoft now has a person whose total job is governance around artificial intelligence. They're not bound to a business unit. They're bound to review all AI before AI goes live in a product. Now, if you're users of Microsoft Office 365, artificial intelligence is all throughout the product. However, Microsoft had to learn this lesson painfully in the public's eye. Anything that happens in the public's eye, get your CEO up in a conference room, getting talked about, obviously makes you friends of our friends in Congress. And I say that lightly, and brings them back in to talk about that. Even Apple, the technology company, the game-changing technology company in the mobile space, would argue that in the late 90s and early, this was the leading company to bring out and kind of revolutionize the world of what the user interface is today for technology. They rolled out a Face ID, and lo and behold, again, there's all types of fun people in the world. They went out and created a 3D mask, which I guarantee you, again, when Apple built the Face ID to secure your phone, to secure your laptop, to secure your solution, they did not intend for someone to go out and get a 3D mask and trick your system. Again, it shows you that human behavior interacting with technology, all types of opportunity for trouble. And finally, the last example I'll bring up is Facebook's chatbot. So the Facebook chatbot, they set them out there to kind of learn how to interact and talk to people. Well, when it couldn't figure out how to talk to people, it started to develop their own language to communicate with each other. Again, I promise you, if we had Mark Zuckerberg here, he's doing a lot of on-prem points where he's showing up to defend what he did before. But I guarantee you his team at that point was not essentially attending that. And, you know, again, you'll see Facebook has now started to move, worried about what their artificial intelligence strategy. And all of these companies have taken a step back in AI after deploying it, right? And unfortunately, I will tell you that what the luxury these technology companies have is that they're kind of given a little more leeway in the expectation to fail because they're big tech companies. They get counted for it, they get punished, but they also have a ton of resources to overcome the challenge. Again, this is why I'm putting in these warning bells here, because if you deploy AI and you don't have the ability to quickly unwind it, if you don't have a partnership with a vendor who's demonstrated what happens they're going to do, what their strategy is, right, around that AI, if the implications go wrong, you're going to be in some challenges that you didn't plan for. And unfortunately, where we sit in L&D, that's a big problem because we don't have a ton of technical resources at our arsenal, and we're not technology companies by trade. And so again, I share these with you. They're also fun stories. Feel free to Google them. There's a lot more depth to them than I've covered here in these first few minutes, and there's lots of them. I could have built literally a deck just about what goes wrong when AI is deployed. So what does this mean to L&D, right? So the way I look at this is artificial intelligence, and I put this, it can be powerful, right? There's no doubt about it. To ignore it is foolish. To embrace it without a strategy is also foolish. So somewhere in the middle of that for right now is where I say we kind of got to be programmatic and thoughtful as we look towards artificial intelligence. It has a tremendous opportunity to democratize learning, right? We're talking about the ability to dynamically deliver content to learners based upon their preferences. And that is really cool, right? Because like I always say, when you're working in a contact center or retail store, you don't have the same time or interest, necessarily the passion for learning that maybe someone does who's sitting in the executive suite. And so they have different styles of learning. One may have gone to 8 years of college, the other one may have gone to 2. And so the ability to kind of cross and deliver content in a way that makes it comfortable for them is important. It can also be extremely personal, right? It can allow you to create personal connections just the way that Amazon, who's the best at this, by the way. If you're not aware of artificial intelligence on steroids, just log into your Amazon.com. If you shop from Amazon.com, which if you don't, please contact me later because I'm always curious to learn from people who don't shop from Amazon, at least at some level. Look at what they recommend from you. That recommendation is using artificial intelligence. It's being personal, right? It's an interesting transformation we're going through right now. Just to share a story, we use Amazon here to help support a lot of our food delivery to the office, right? So that we don't have to go out and buy snacks on our own and go to the grocery store. And so what's happening is that account happens to be a shared account with my home account. And so now my wife is joking with me all the time about all these things that should be recommended to purchase that we don't eat. So, you know, there's a lot of different audiences here in the office. We eat a lot of things like potato chips. In our house, I don't think we own potato chips. So it's just an example of how it's interesting to watch Amazon not be able to bifurcate its artificial intelligence to know when I'm looking for something versus my wife, because it can't disassociate those. So it's neat that it can be personal, but it's also, again, without being thought out. And I'm sure Amazon never thought that we would share an account and have 2 different ordering strategies on it. You can use AI to automate manual processes, right? Again, great way to go in and say, hey, this is a process where we think artificial intelligence can drive it, automatic delivery of learning programs. It could be around sending out a self-coaching message out to the learner based upon performance and programs. And again, I'll just continue to put this out here. It can also be dangerous, right? It can catch you in a lot of trouble. What does it require from you? Tons of discipline, right? Tons of discipline. Don't buy it. Don't use it. Don't do it if you're not going to be religious and focused on the methods I talked about before when you're setting it up, and making sure that there is a discipline in your process in both the building, the maintaining, and the rolling out of your solution. It requires lots of planning, regular check-ins, and proof of controls. So I would argue that artificial intelligence is one of those things that if you're not demonstrating to people how you're controlling it, you should be concerned. Or if someone tells you they have it and they can't prove it, again, I would be highly concerned. So that's what I wanted to cover with you all. If there's any questions, I'm glad to answer them. If not, we'll give you the time back and let Josh keep you going on your journey.
So if you have any questions that you might have for Jordan, go ahead and put those in the chat channel. We'll give it just a couple minutes. Okay, Jordan, we have one question for you. Do you foresee AI possibly being a fad within learning due to the disruption that could take place?
It's a great question. Think about that. I think all buzzwords are fads. So I'm going to start with that as my first statement to this conversation. I think artificial intelligence is already actively being used throughout the world of learning. I don't think it's been defined as artificial intelligence. So I don't know that it will go away. I don't know that it'll be a fad. I also don't know that it will do everything that everyone's laid out in front of it. Like most technology, media, just like anything else, venture capitalists and the market drive what I'll call the brand awareness of an offering, right? So I talked about social enterprise earlier, right? For all of you that are old enough to remember the social enterprise, it was going to change the world of how we interact and communicate with others. And I'd argue it didn't do that. And so when people talk about artificial intelligence being a game changer for L&D, I tend to not buy as much in the hype. I won't call it the fad won't hit it, but whatever the grandest statement is, just like any grand statement, will have a hard time becoming a reality. I think artificial intelligence will get embedded into what we do. It won't become second nature to us. But I do think things like, we're going to have integrated Alexa and Cortana interactive learning experiences and Siri learning experiences, and that's not going anywhere, right? When we started using voice recognition and all those types of tools and artificial intelligence to listen to conversations and deliver results, that's going to happen, right? We're seeing that in contact center worlds, and I think that data is going to come to L&D. So I don't know if the fad will hit the mark, but it will definitely be a part of the L&D moving forward. Just how big a part of it, I question in the long run.
Okay, and it looks like we have one more question coming in. Brandon mentioned that 60% increase in new technology, especially focused on AI, but only 3% is focused on training. What is your message to bring that 3% obviously increasing, and especially if 60% of that is going towards AI?
Yeah, so I probably have as much of a grand statement that Brandon would say. I think this is the beginning of where you have to understand partnering with the business is super essential, and you have to start doing that by providing value to them first. And I'm going to say that as directly as I can. I think the business doesn't view L&D, unfortunately, as their partner to drive value in all situations. And I think for L&D to essentially raise the bar on what that spend is around training and how the impacts of AI, they have to start demonstrating to the business that they can make an impact. And that starts and begins with data and tying off the value of the learning programs that you're building and demonstrating performance. And it could be anything, right? It could be delivering better coaching experience for managers, which then associate what you may say, well, how does that relate to AI? Well, what it does is it builds your value, right? Relationship building takes a long time. The whole world has gone into this concept of instant gratification, right? I'm way too old to be a part of this, but by understanding there's apps like Tinder and all these other things that connect people with people for relationships. And, but relationships take time. No matter what you do, you have to build rapport. You have to build trust. You have to build value. So if you can build trust and value and rapport with your business partners, it gives you an opportunity to demonstrate and say, hey, look at the massive investment that's being made in artificial intelligence. But look at the lack of investment we're making inside of training. And this really needs to essentially transform that at least our budget needs to be able to go up and come on and match, or at least come close to that, right? So I'd get on the ground now and I'd start delivering value and ensure I had a great relationship with my business partners in IT and in the business. And I'd start chiming away and saying, hey, if you're going to be deploying these artificial intelligence solutions, we need to be a part of that, to be part of the change management process for the associate, to be a change management process maybe for the customer, and again, be part of the journey from beginning to end, ensuring that you're riding along that journey with them versus sitting on the side and waiting for the request. As we all know in L&D, right? You get the form that says, hey, we have this problem, go fix it. Well, by the time it's a problem, it's a little too late. It's already on fire. You want to be there proactively and through the process. And I think you do that through data and partnering with the business in that journey. So I have another question that came in from Bob. Can we use the hot topic of using AI in learning to help attract technology team members and learning team? Yes. Yes, you can. I would argue that the way to get top talent into L&D in the tech space is to talk about embracing top technologies that they're interested in, right? And artificial intelligence is one of them. So by creating projects that essentially impact human performance, that's extremely interesting. Most of the technologies that I've interacted with, and I've been in the space for about 30 years now, that's unfortunately how old I am in this journey, they love to make an impact. And it's great when they get to part of projects and they can see that impact become a reality. So I think L&D is one of the few places where they can actually impact individual performance. So I'd be all over that. I'd be like, hey man, we're going to do a project and we're going to change the way whatever you're trying to change it. And I get them super excited about it and how they're going to be a major part of designing, implementing, and maintaining this awesome solution. So I think it's a great recruiting tool. Bob, it's a brilliant idea. Amy, what do you currently see as a big advantage of using AI in learning? What is my go-to statement for leadership? I love that, Amy. What's my go-to statement for leadership? So what's the biggest advantage in using AI in learning? I think it's personalization, and I would say democratization. And I would make my go-to statement to my leadership team about using artificial intelligence to drive personalized learning outcomes based on performance. I don't know how, if you had your leadership team, and again, I would argue your leadership team should be a combination both of maybe your head of L&D, but also the business, where you say, hey, look, we have an opportunity through artificial intelligence to essentially go into our systems of performance and dynamically create learning experiences that help learners in the flow of work increase their performance, which increase your bottom line, right? If you go to somebody and say, look, I can improve the bottom line, I can either save us money, I can have us make more sales, I can have us improve the quality of customer service, I can have us onboard an employee faster, I can help us with employee retention, and I can do this through the use of artificial intelligence, nobody's going to argue that point. Nobody wants to not help their company get to that end line. So my go-to move would, no matter what I wanted to do, would be about how do I impact the bottom line? And it would be my closing and opening statements. And artificial intelligence would just be this tool that got me there, right? Because that's all it is a tool, right? It's a tool off the shelf that you're pulling off to get you to your outcome. So Amy, great question. I wish you the best of luck. And if you want to practice a few times, give me a shout and we'll go through it together. Any more questions, folks? Chris, in the contact center space, what is AI going to drive for me? Well, Chris, so I think in the contact center space, AI is already in play. For those who are in the contact center space, I imagine you're using listening technology to listen to calls, and AI is being applied to that listening to essentially pull out the best in the best outcome. It's going to pull data that's going to allow you to prescribe and build programs that essentially help improve the quality and performance of those calls. And so your follow-up is sorry and learning. Well, don't be sorry about that. No, just kidding. So again, I look at Amy's comment. It's not one size fits all. AI is built to essentially allow to be designed to create the outcomes you want to reach. So maybe what I would argue back, Chris, is maybe we take a step back and think about what's the largest problem inside your L&D organization or in your company you're trying to solve through training. And maybe let's look at that and figure out how AI can impact that. It's feeding from Amy's original question. It's also the best place to start. Where the biggest pain is the biggest opportunity to solve it and the most interest from the organization. I think, like I mentioned throughout this deck, and I'm glad to share it afterwards, wherever you use AI, it has the opportunity to make an impact. That impact will be defined by the parameters of which you create within that artificial intelligence solution. Any more questions? This is great.
Okay, well, we'd like to thank Jordan for obviously joining us today and telling us more about AI and where it's really going to have a play within learning and what to be as well as what to be looking out for to ensure that you're not tripped up by any of the great features and functionalities that people are pitching out there in AI. I think one of my favorite comments that he had in there was in regards to the